Alright, woodworkers, this is the moment I've all been waiting for. Alright, so I have everything done as far as preparation for gluing up my veneered top, or tabletop. So I've put these things kind of in random order here, but first things first, I need to have a platen that matches the shape of my substrate. So when I laid these things up, you'll notice that the size of the platen extends or is greater than the size of my substrate by about an inch in all directions, or an inch total, so ½ inch in all directions. Anything longer or greater than an inch, you're going to start to force the vacuum bag to kind of squeeze down on this corner that's not supported, and it could start to bow your platen, which doesn't really do you any good. So you have to make it close to the size. So alright, I've done that with this. The other thing that I've done is I've rounded all of the corners here, obviously just MDF. You can use whatever you like. Melamine is great because it has that slick surface that the adhesive typically doesn't stick to if there is in fact any bleed out. Typically that's a bigger problem if you're using resin, not so much PVA glue like we're going to use. But easing all of these corners, that way in the midst of gluing this thing up I don't have to look for little rubber corners and make sure that when I put this into the vacuum bag that those things don't shift. Now you could spend time and run a round over bit with a router on doing this, but that's a real good way to destroy your router bits. This stuff, and especially melamine with that layer of laminate, those things will just destroy router bits. So alright, so this is my, and it needs to go this way, so this is my platen, right side up. The other thing that I have is, as I talked about with cutting the veneer, this is going to be the bottom of my tabletop, so the underside, or the second face. And so paper-backed material here, and I've cut this well oversized, so a little bit counter to what I talked about before when I was talking about doing square panels, like this one. So when veneering a square panel here, it's always better to have that veneer a little bit smaller than a clean edge here or a factory edge, so that after the veneer goes down you can trim all this stuff off referencing those edges. So big difference from this to gluing up these pieces, only because I need to have a little bit of extension on this. It's an irregular shape given that I've got this ellipse kind of shape. So I need to have a little bit of extra wiggle room here. So that's where this one goes. It's actually going to end up looking like this. And then I have my substrate. And what I'm going to do is, I've already shot these areas here where I filled in with Bondo, both faces. So shellac, I hit that with those areas. It's going to seal it up. It's also going to create an easy environment for the adhesive to bond. Alright, so this one, as I've talked about, I've cut awfully close to the final dimensions. Nice straight edge here, and I'll trim off the excess after the veneer is on. Alright, so I'm going to glue this in this orientation here, and you'll notice that the veneer is upside down, so when I put the substrate down onto this, it's going to compress against this in the vacuum bag. It's going to pull everything together. I could easily flip this over and have the up, or the show face facing up when I'm gluing this thing up. I don't prefer that for one simple reason. After I apply adhesive on this face, I want to lay this down, and I want to adjust the orientation here, and I'll be able to see where all of these points terminate and make sure that I've got good coverage on this. The veneer is left oversized everywhere, which is what I want. Yes, the veneer tape is going to be adhered down into my substrate, and after this is dry, then I'll trim all this stuff off. I probably could have cut this off a little bit more, but as I was doing so to trim these things down, it was starting to tear a little bit, give me some rips, and so I didn't want to sacrifice having this thing tear into my substrate. Probably not the end of the world. I would just use some veneer tape on it, but one less step for me to worry about. Okay, So that's the setup here. The last piece is that I have a platen that I'm going to carry or transport the whole thing into the vacuum bag. So the vacuum bag has a platen. It's the stuff with the grid work you'll see here in a second. What I don't want to do, pardon me, what I don't want to do is feed the substrate with the veneer into the vacuum bag, because this stuff is going to start to catch on that grid pattern and it's just going to create a big mess. So it's easier for me to lift the whole thing up using this material and just 1/4 inch MDF, and I could slide the whole thing in without worrying. I'm not going to worry about rounding off the corners on this thing, only because it's so thin. 1/4 inch, the bag is not really going to compress and really pinch and squeeze onto this thickness. This was 3/4 of an inch, maybe even a 1/2 inch. Then I would start to worry about these corners, but this is great. This is just fine. Okay, so I'm going to use this cold press veneer stuff, which, as we talked about before, the lids are sometimes difficult to get off. But more importantly, it's a different formulation from that of regular yellow glue, and it leaves less opportunity for this to bleed through your veneer. And sometimes if you're working with a veneer that's really open pored or has open pores, you'll definitely start to notice that the adhesive can bleed through, and that's not a lot of fun in any capacity, because then your veneer is going to be stuck to whatever it is your platen material is made of, and so that's not ideal. Alright, once again, and this is somewhat repetitive from previous conversations about vacuum bags and veneering, application of this adhesive is so critical. I want to have this adhesive as even as I possibly can. I'm less worried about how much of a coating I have here, as long as I have good even coverage everywhere. But what I am worried about is making sure that I don't have a pocket of more adhesive in one area than another. So this one looks pretty great to me. To my eye, that's even. There's no dry spots. I'm kind of looking under a raking light. That looks easy. And now comes the fun part. So the center line here on this piece, I can line up exactly where I want this thing to go. That's there. Centered, pretty centered, off center. Cool. Alright, that's that. So as I was saying, the tool you use to apply the adhesive is, there's not a lot of options. I think that I've seen some people use something, usually a shop-made V-notch trowel or something in that realm, and what that does is it spreads this stuff out by allowing the glue to squeeze between those little notches. But I think that these rollers are so easy to find and so inexpensive, and if you are not using resin, you can just clean these out and reuse them. I think this roller is at least a decade old, if not more. Alright, and that's that. One more reminder is that I never apply adhesive to the veneer, regardless of paper-backed or not. I only apply it to the substrate. This one I'm far less fussy about. That's good. This one goes on here. Good preparation. Makes all the difference for this. Alright, so I've got good overage everywhere. Alright, now we're ready to transport this over to the vacuum bag. Sorry for my sniffles and my coughing. I'm very much getting over nasty colds. as much as I can, I want to make sure that the trip into the vacuum bag is as quick as it possibly can from the time I apply the adhesive to the first side of the substrate. The longer I let that glue set outside without any pressure, it could start to develop some pretty nasty habits like different wrinkles and introduction of moisture on certain spots of the veneer but not others. So as much as I can, I want to make sure that I've got good preparation, getting it in as fast as I can. And right now, I'm clamping this into the bag. I'm trying to get out all the wrinkles from the vacuum bag because that's an easy way to get air or let air in. Alright. Success. So I just wanted to make sure to recenter that top platen. These are my hands. The top platen to make sure that I've got that centered over my substrate, and you can see that the whole thing is fairly well centered onto everything I need, so this is going to be great. I'm going to leave this in for about an hour. That's all you need according to the adhesive manufacturer. So leave this in for an hour, I take this out, and probably just leave it until the glue fully cures before I start trimming off those edges, but that'll be a breeze. Alright, thanks, see you guys later.